Shavua Tov. Let us light up the darkness. Who will be first to tell us where they're tuning in from? We're starting a new week. I'm starting it here in Washington at APAC. I've met a lot of wonderful people who are joined in their love of Israel. It's a beautiful, beautiful crowd. I was here for the Shabbaton in Washington, D.C. It was just absolutely lovely. Learned Torah, learned about Israel, prayed with beautiful community of people, heard a fantastic Daf Yomi Shir from Rabbi Stephen Weil, the head of the OU, the Orthodox Union. He actually invited me to share a few words in his Daf Yomi class this morning here at APAC. It was a nice honor for me, but I take it on behalf of our accidental Talmudist community. Judith Sobel says Shavua Tov from Florence, South Carolina. James Roth in the house from Indianapolis. So good to be starting the week with you, my holy brothers and sisters. Who else is in the house? Let us know. Make some comments there. Signal to Facebook that something of value is happening and enable more of our holy brothers and sisters to receive the notice that something of value is happening here. Marcus Tempe from Sublimity, Oregon. Sublimity? I've never heard of that city. What a cool name for a town. I love it. Cheryl Strack says Shalom from Indianapolis. Keep doing it. Keep telling us, my friends, where you're tuning in from. We've got YouTube going as well. That's fantastic. So glad that if you could see my little rig here, I've got two phones going. And it's so nice. YouTube, not everybody's on Facebook, but everyone can have access to YouTube, and that's terrific. Hello, Venus Black from Stockton, California. Nice to see you here. All right, my friends. We are heading into that final stretch here in the first tractate of the Talmud, Berachos. We're in chapter 9. Yesterday, we finally completed our long journey through dreams. You know, as we mentioned, our sages saw fit in this tractate, which is about practical matters, right? What was Berachos about? How to pray the Shema, how to pray the Amidah, the standing prayer, the daily prayer, blessings for all kinds of situations, the grace after the meals. And suddenly we did this long digression, not on blessings or prayer, but on how to interpret dreams. It's because dreams are important. We are spiritual people, my friends, right? We don't have souls. We are souls. We have bodies. We come into this world with a mission. And it's good now and then to touch base with our Maker, touch base with our higher self, and ask the question, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I fulfilling my mission here? And when we ask about a dream that we remember, why did God give me this dream? As soon as you ask that question, you're halfway to getting an answer. You'll especially as you work with your dreams, and that's what our sages have done. They've given us a vocabulary for the language of dreams, right? The more we work with them, the more we'll be able to find meaning in those dreams. And this, by the way, extends even beyond dreams, right? The more often we ask the question, why am I here? God, why am I here? Why did you send me here? To ask that question is to look at yourself, to look at your life, to see where you can do the most good. Because God wouldn't send you a message, and his message was, yeah, I think the reason that you're on earth is to buy a second Rolex, or to get a yacht, or to go on a nice vacation. You should enjoy those things if you can enjoy those things. But we all know instinctively that we were sent here to do some good for others. It's got to have something to do with doing good for others. The more often we ask that question, the more we'll start to think, well, what tools have I been given? Where do my talents lie? Where can I do the most good? Where have I been being lazy, slacking off, etc.? The more we ask those questions, the more we'll do that introspection and the better answers we will get. Now on page 58 of Berachos, we get back into the mode of Berachos, of blessings, right? This is the tractate on blessings, and we're going to finish off by studying blessings, right? Blessings that we say. And as we said in chapter 9, the main theme is, when do we say a blessing? When something unusual happens, right? An anomaly in our life, in our world, in our day. When something unusual happens, it's a time to make a blessing for it, whether it's good or bad, but to remember that God made the world for a reason, God sent us into the world for a reason, and we're gonna bless him for it. I actually just had an opportunity to do that last night and today during Shabbat. Something really crazy happened to me. First of all, I had the good fortune of running into my dear friend, Rabbi Yonah Bookstein. He lives in the Pico neighborhood of LA. I live in the Hancock Park neighborhood of LA. We live, it's an 8-minute drive, but it's too far to walk on Shabbat. And so we've never spent Shabbat together, and we were laughing that we finally are spending Shabbat together. We didn't intend it, but we ran into each other here in Washington, D.C. at AIPAC. At any rate, during the Friday night services, we got to a singing occasion. In our world, dancing. In the room that we were in, there wasn't much dancing going on. But he got up and pulled me up and said, let's go dance around the room during the Lecha Dodi, when we welcome Shabbat, we welcome the Sabbath bride. And my friends, I got out of my chair, I took one step, and my knee buckled. I mean, just buckled. I felt like something popped in the back of my knee. It really hurt. It was really scary. I had surgery on that knee a long time ago. It's been almost 20 years. But from time to time, something goes wrong with that knee, and it just hurt so much. And I just couldn't walk after that. Eventually, I had to leave the conference center, get home, ice it. Thank God, icing last night helped. Icing this morning helped. And today I was able to go back to the conference center and be part of the event, limping around all day. Last night and this morning, I kept saying, thank you, God. Thank you. I'm going to practice what I've been preaching. I'm going to practice what I've been learning here in Berachos. You got to bless God for the bad as well as for the good. And I said, I know you have a reason that you sent me this sudden, for no reason, popping knee. And knees, berech, right? The word for knee, same root as bracha, blessing. No coincidence. I've been teaching you blessings, right, for 57 pages. We started on page 2. We're on 58. So for 57 pages, I've been teaching you about blessings, and then my knee goes out. And I said, okay, there's a lesson here. Maybe I have not been diligent enough. Maybe I haven't been careful enough with my blessings. But God, thank you for sending me this lesson, this teaching, this physical teaching that you sent me. I know I need to slow down. And when I thought about it, I got to say, right before that happened, because I told you that we were in a room where there was a lot of people, they were praying beautifully, but not like what I'm used to, right? So normally Friday nights in LA, I'm part of a group. I'm actually the gabbai in a small but very spirited minyan at Yekusiel Kalmanson's house in LA, where we really go for it. We sing loud and high and big and just get carried away in it. And now it was with a different group of people doing a different style of Friday night prayer. And the little, voice inside my head was saying, I wish they would sing it more. I wish they would do it more like what I'm used to. I wish it was more spirited. And then at a certain moment, I said, what am I doing? That's crazy. First of all, I should be praying and thinking about my relationship with God and my fellow Jews and being thankful, not having an inner voice of criticism. I need to just, stop this critique of other people in my head and get into it. And I did that, and as soon as I did that, internally I connected much better with the prayer that I was saying. And it was not 30 seconds later that Rabbi Yonah came by, pulled me out of my chair, I took one step, and my knee popped. So I know there's a lesson in there. Thank God my knee's already getting better. It's not going to be terrible, but I'm going to remember. I'm not going to just have that thought, connect with it for a moment, and then go back to whatever I was doing. I'm going to remember, and I want to share with you, learn from my popped knee, that you don't have to do this yourself. When you find yourself criticizing the people around you inside, in other words, judging, right? Judging, for whatever reason, not like there's something bad about them, but just judging them because they're not doing what I'm used to. It is an impediment to loving your fellow. It's an impediment to connecting with God. It's an impediment to being your best self and to being the best you can be for others. And I feel like I'm going to remember that now. So maybe that was the lesson of my little popped knee at that moment. All right, let's get back to blessings. Here on page 58, I'm going to give you some crucial highlights from this page. If a Jew sees 600,000 Jews in one place, unusual, right? How often does that happen? More likely to happen in Israel, but even in Israel, how often are there 600,000 Jews in one place? Like literally in one place, a crowd of 600,000 Jews. I think that happened maybe by Ovadia Yosef's funeral. I think there was maybe that many people, maybe more. There might have been 1 million people there. He was a really beloved sage of Israel who died a few years ago. May his memory always be for a blessing. When you see such a large crowd of Jews, you make a blessing, and the blessing is, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who knows all secrets." Is that interesting? You might have thought that the blessing was, who makes so many Jews, or who makes the multitudes, or who makes us, so many of us and we all look different, something like that. But the blessing is, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who knows all secrets." And the explanation is given because though we are all different, everyone is a unique individual with unique thoughts going on in his or her head, only God can know the mind and the heart of all those people. Benzoma, the sage Benzoma is the one who, he's at the footer of every email I send. If you ever got an email from me, at the bottom it says, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person." That's a quote from Benzoma, Shimon Benzoma. So Benzoma had that experience. He was at the temple once, and he saw such a crowd at the Temple Mount. And so he said that blessing, right? "Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the universe, who knows all secrets." And then he added an extra blessing. Right? He created this. It is not the law that if you see such a crowd, you are obligated to recite this blessing. But Benzoma added a blessing, which is a very beautiful blessing. He said, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who created all these people to serve me." Now, what he meant by that, he's not the king. Obviously, they don't all serve him, right? But what he meant was that, and he explains, look at Adam, right? The first human. For Adam to have bread, he had to grow the wheat, harvest the wheat, grind the wheat, make flour, gather all the other ingredients, bake it, and then he could have bread. But Benzoma says, I wake up and there's bread. I can just go buy it and eat it, right? Likewise, if the first man, Adam, wanted to wear a garment, he had to grow the plant that was going to make the thread. He had to harvest it. He had to, spin or it wasn't wool, right? Maybe it was flax, a garment made out of flax. He had to grow it, harvest it, cut it, treat it, turn it into a fiber, then turn the thread into a garment. I mean, so much work just to have one garment. But me, Benzoma, I could just go to the market and buy a garment. Now, I've made this blessing, sometimes. I don't do it regularly, but I definitely like to do it whenever I remember. If I'm sitting down to a meal and I think, thank you to all the people who participated in bringing this food to me. The truck drivers, the farmers, the sellers, the merchandisers, the distributors, the chef, if I'm in a restaurant, the server. I mean, so many people participate in that chain, so that I can have a nice piece of food in front of me. And it's a beautiful thing to, not just thank all those people in your mind, but to bless God for making all these people who can divide up all that labor and organize ourselves, into populations and cities and all the things that we do so that we can function and live the comfortable life that we are privileged to live. Rabbi Yochanan says, one should run to see a king, whether he's a king of Israel or a king of another nation. If you have the opportunity to see the leader of a nation, you should run and make that happen, right? These days, okay, I mean, we see their pictures in the paper all the time. We see them on TV. We're very familiar with the faces of the rulers of nations. Back then, no such thing as pictures in newspapers, TV, nothing like that. The only opportunity people had to see a king was if the king happened to come by, or if they were able to go to a city where the king was going to make an appearance. And we see on TV, when the Queen of England makes an appearance and such huge crowds show up to get a look at her. And he says that's a good thing to do. If you have that opportunity to see the face of the leader of a nation, you should. And why should a Jew especially, or really anybody? Because if we're privileged to be there, right, when Messiah comes and the dead are resurrected, and we're in that world when everyone is available and we can see everyone and just be part of the whole resurrected world and the messianic age. So then, if we've seen the kings and queens at some point in our life because we got that opportunity, we'll recognize them when we run into them in the messianic age. It's interesting. Well, in the messianic age, won't it be obvious who are the kings and queens? Perhaps not. Perhaps in that age, there'll only be one king in the world, God, one leader in the world, the Messiah, and the kings and queens, will be like the regular people, but we'll recognize them because we had a chance to see them at another time. And do I have it here? And so if you see, okay, and so now we have this beautiful story. Okay, so Rav Sheishes, so one of the sages, had such an opportunity. A king was coming down the road and people knew that the king was coming. So Rav Sheishes joined the crowd, sort of flocking to the road to be there when the king came by. There was a heretic standing next to Rav Sheishes, right? So one of these smart Alecs who thinks they know everything, a person of no faith, but a big mouth, right? So this heretic looks at Rav Sheishes and says, wait a minute, aren't you blind? Rav Sheishes says, yes, I'm blind. So what are you doing? Like you're in a hurry to go see the king, but you're not going to see anything. Rav Sheishes tries to ignore the heretic, the smart aleck. The heretic says, jugs go to the river because they're going to be used to fill it with water. Why would a broken jug go to the river? Says the heretic. I mean, insulting a blind man, right? A sage who happens to be blind. Rav Sheishes says, we'll see. I believe I know more than you. So they're waiting, and then the crowd starts to make a big ruckus, a big noise in the crowd. And the heretic says, ooh, the king is coming. And Rav Sheishes says, the king is not coming. And indeed, some guards of the advanced, the advanced platoon of the king's soldiers walks by, but not the king. And then a little while later, there's another big ruckus, big noise goes through the crowd. And the heretic says, now the king is coming. And Rav Sheishes, who's blind, says, no, the king is not coming. And then a silence. And then, of course, it was just more soldiers, and the king does not come by. Then a silence falls over the crowd. And Rav Sheishes says, now the king is coming. And indeed, the king walked by. I just want to see. And so he says, now the king is coming. And the heretic says to Rav Sheishes, how did you know? And Rav Sheishes quotes a beautiful passage from the Bible about, let me just get it in front of me, there. And it's about the prophet Elijah. You'll recall, yes, so the heretic said to him, how did you know? And Rav Sheishes said to him, royalty on earth is like royalty in the heavens, as it is written with regard to God's revelation to Elijah the prophet on Mount Horeb. And so Rav Sheishes quotes this about Elijah. And this is from the book of Kings, 1 Kings 19. And he said, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind rent the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And it was so when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. God's revelation was a moment of silence. You probably heard this teaching before. It's such an important one, right? You might think that God would be this huge commotion and earthquakes and fire, right? But the presence of God is actually very still, very quiet, very intimate, very personal. And so Rav Sheishess knew it would be something like that, right? When you see a king in this world, it's like a little bit of a, obviously it's not like seeing God, but it has a touch of that quality, right? And so the people became hushed when the king went by. And that's how he knew that the king was coming by, in that silence. So when the king came, Rav Sheishess began to bless him. And the heretic mockingly said, remember, if you're tuning in now, Rav Sheishess is blind. And so this heretic, this smart aleck with a big mouth and no knowledge or faith, the heretic mockingly said to him, "Do you bless someone you do not see?" And the Gemara asks, and what ultimately happened to this heretic? Some say that his friends gouged out his eyes because they realized what an idiot and a nasty person he was. And others say Rav Sheishess fixed his gaze upon him. This is a blind man, but a sage of Israel, right? Fixed his gaze upon him, and the heretic became a pile of bones. You know? Actually happened, metaphoric. Maybe this heretic learned something and became a better person. Maybe he was shamed to his bones. Or maybe he had that X-ray stare that just reduced that heretic to a pile of bones. That's somebody perhaps who makes fun of a blind man, mocks him. At any rate, what is the blessing we say when we see a king? If a Jew sees a king of Israel, the blessing is, get it in front of me, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has shared of his glory with those who revere him." If a Jew sees a king of another nation, he says, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has given of his glory to flesh and blood." That was the story of Rav Sheishess, and this comes apropos of the idea that we should rush to see a king when we get that opportunity, a king or a queen, and that's the blessing we say. So these are blessings for anomalous situations. When something unusual happens, we say a blessing, a reminder to be grateful and to check in with God for what's going on around us. Ula and Rav Chisda were walking together, and they passed the doorway of Rav Chana bar Chanilai. And Rav Chisda sighed. Right, he sighed. Alas, he showed physically just how sad he was as they walked by the doorway of this other sage. Ula said, why do you sigh? Are you not aware that Rav said that sighing, right? In other words, sinking into your misery so much that you're physically affected, it breaks half the body. And Rabbi Yochanan said, actually, sighing breaks the whole body. This is what Ula is saying to Rav Chisda after he sighs. Rav Chisda says, don't tell me what I should feel, what I should be. I'm sighing because Rav Chana bar Chanilai was the most generous, thoughtful, beautiful person who ever walked this world. Right? He was a very, very rich man who kept 60 cooks during the day and another 60 cooks during the night. Why? Constantly making huge amounts of food to give away to the poor. Anybody could come to his house. There were 4 entrances around the house. Anybody could come in who was hungry and eat. This Rav Chana Bar Hanilai just made it his life's mission to feed the hungry. And not only that, they would put sacks of grain, sacks of food outside the house at a little bit of a distance, because some people are poor and also embarrassed that they're poor, and so they shouldn't have to come in, and be seen eating charity. Rav Chana Bar Hanilai, it's a name I wasn't that familiar with, but Rav Chana Bar Hanilai would instruct his servants to sort of stash food outside where the poor could get it privately and not, be forced to feel embarrassed when they came in to eat of his charity. I mean, that's a really, really beautiful person. And Rav Sheishess is saying that such a person is gone from this world, and now his house is boarded up, and they're no longer having that operation of feeding the poor. I'm actually a little bit reminded, Nina and I many years ago were in New Delhi in India, and I believe it's the Sikh temple, but there was a temple there in that town where they feed 10,000 people a day. Like, the religious practice of this temple is feeding the poor, and they feed 10,000 people a day. We were very impressed by that. At any rate, Rav Sheishess says to Ula, shouldn't I be sad that such a man is gone from this world, that his home is shut up, and that the poor are not getting that sustenance that he was once giving them? And Ula says, I can see why you would feel sad that he's gone, but to give yourself over to misery in such a way that, it kind of breaks your body, takes you out. Because remember, when we give ourselves over into sadness, we can't always help it. But for our sages, particularly for Hasidim, the Hasidic movement started much, much later, about 1,700 years later than all of this. But it's such an important practice to cultivate joy, right? Because wisdom is more possible in a state of joy. Connection with the divine presence, more possible in a state of joy. There's also a teaching that the gate of tears is always open, and God is very open to a broken heart. That's when we can't help it. But if we can help it, we try to not give ourselves over to sadness. If we can pull ourselves out of sadness, which is a very difficult thing to do, but it's an important spiritual practice. At any rate, Ula said, what can help you pull yourself out of this is to know that Rabbi Yochanan said, quoting Isaiah, that once the temple was destroyed, not only would the temple be destroyed, but many of the houses of the righteous would also be fallen. But in the future age, when the Messiah returns and Mount Zion is restored, the righteous and their homes will also be restored, right? So you can be sure that Rav Chana Bar Hanilai will be back, right? He'll be back. His home will be big. We also have a teaching that in the Messianic age, there will still be poor people. So he will have, the possibility of feeding the poor again. And if he was feeding, 100 people a day before, or 1,000 people a day before, he'll be able to feed 10,000 or 100,000, many more. He'll be back. So let that cheer you, is what Ula was saying to Rav Sheishess. And, hopefully Rav Sheishess was convinced. The end of the story, I don't think it was given, right? Oops, let me just get there. Was the end of the story given? I didn't think so. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, Ula gets the last word, right? Because when he says they'll be back, so you don't have to be so sad. You have no reason to sigh. Oh, and then it says, Rav Sheishess was not satisfied. Seeing that he was still not satisfied, Ula said to him, it is enough for a servant to be like his master. Since God leaves his home, the holy temple, in ruins, one should not be distraught over the destruction of the houses of the righteous. Right? We're in a state where the temple is in a ruin. We don't have the temple. We have to manage to go on and live even though the temple is gone. So if we can manage to find joy in our lives in a world that doesn't have a temple in it, we can also have joy in our lives in a world where the houses of the righteous that are gone. That's what Ula says to him, and the story is left at that. Finally, for tonight, I just wanted to share, I wished I had this passage with me a couple of years ago when I was in Uman, Ukraine, and Moshe Storch and a couple of friends, and I've told this story before, we went to the place of where my ancestors are from Chichelnik, Ukraine. And it's not one of those towns that lots of visitors go to, like Berdichev and Medjugorje, where there are famous rebbes buried. Very few people make it to Chichelnik. Whoops, I didn't have the do not disturb. Oh, I do now. Okay, but my point is, we did find a graveyard. It was a graveyard that was long abandoned, desecrated many times. Nonetheless, it was a graveyard, a Jewish graveyard. Right, so it was a graves of Israel. There were graves of Israel here in the Ukraine, and you can find, there's many Jewish cemeteries in communities that no longer have Jews in them, but the cemeteries are still there, and a lot of people visit these cemeteries. A lot of Jews do when they go into Eastern Europe, into Poland, Ukraine, Russia. You can visit these towns, and there's actually a beautiful blessing that you can say. And it seems particularly apt in these cemeteries that get so few visitors, right? Like if you go to a cemetery in Israel, okay, so the people who are buried there get visited, right? Jews go there all the time to see their relatives, there's funerals, etc. But one of these abandoned and often desecrated graveyards in Eastern Europe that gets so few visitors, here's something that you can say to comfort, right? The bodies that are buried there. And in the final resting place, wherever a person is buried, there's a piece of the soul. The majority, let's say, of the soul goes to the world of souls, but there's a piece of the soul that remains with the body in its final resting place. And you can say, when you see multiple graves of Israel, the sages taught, one who sees graves of Israel recites, "Blessed is the Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who formed you in judgment," talking to the graves, "who formed you in judgment, and who nourished you in judgment, and who sustained you in judgment, and collected your soul in judgment, and in the future will raise you from the dead in judgment." And Mar, son of Ravina, adds to this blessing, concludes the formula of this blessing in the name of Rav Nachman, saying, "And who knows the number of you all," meaning God, "and who knows the number of you all, and who in the future will restore you to life and sustain you. Blessed is the Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who revives the dead." Isn't that beautiful? It seems so comforting. It sounds so beautiful. It's something you can say if you're ever in one of these abandoned graveyards to give comfort to the dead who are buried there. Evan J. Crame, I hope to meet you at APAC. I would love to meet you. I'll be wearing my gray hat. That's how you can find me in a crowd. Are there any questions? Leona Thacker says, during the Depression, my grandmother would take all leftover food from meals and put them in metal containers and leave it on the back garden gate for the hungry. She always said it is our responsibility to feed our neighbors also. Beautiful. May your grandmother's memory, if she's with us, we honor her. If she's left this world, may her memory always be for a blessing. And thank you for sharing that practice that she did. It's a beautiful teaching. Johanna Rivka Hinksman says, beautiful teachings. Thank you. Thank you, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on this Saturday night. I wish you a gut Woch. That's Yiddish for a good week. Shavua Tov is Hebrew. Good Woch is Hebrew. May you all be blessed. May we all be blessed with a good week, a week of peace, a week of healing, a week of joy, and a week of prosperity. Why not? Sending you big love from the nation's capital.